Hey there guys, Tom here. Welcome back to my movie channel and thank you very much for joining me for this, my review of Disney Gallery The Mandalorian, the 8-part series about how they made The Mandalorian, which wouldn't it be fucking great if they actually told us about how this show came to be? But more on that in a second. If you guys haven't been here before, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring that notifications bell so that you never miss out on my take on all things movies. So this is the documentary mini-series of the making of The Mandalorian. Now, I am a big fan of The Mandalorian. I love that show. I can't wait for season 2. Bring it on. But I gotta be honest, I found this documentary series a big fucking fat waste of time. There are 2 episodes in the Gallery Mandalorian documentary that I did enjoy. Those were the episodes on the volume. The episode on the volume where they have like the CGI, digital wall behind the actors on the set, so that, and then you can't tell what's real and what isn't. That was a cool episode. I learned a lot about, that kind of process. And the other episode I liked was the props episode, especially, because Baby Yoda. But for the most part, this documentary was a complete and utter waste of airtime. When you go back and say what you will about the prequels, the Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, if you bought those prequels DVDs, we're not talking Blu-rays, folks, we're talking DVDs. Go back to those DVDs, and I think they're on Disney Plus, I'm not sure. But the prequels had like extensive hours upon hours of basically a documentary on the making of each of those movies. And you feel like, when I watched those as a kid, it's fascinating stuff. And it's some of the best behind the scenes content of any movie ever is those prequels. It documents George Lucas, like sitting down in his office, starting to write The Phantom Menace. And it basically goes through the entire process. You learn about the second assistant editor and then the third assistant editor. And you learn about the guy who runs and gets coffees. And you learn about the second AD, and they have a whole bit on extras and animators and all these different, like the props guys and the visual effects guys. It's such an extensive and expansive documentary. And you feel like you were on set because you're watching all this stuff happen. Those were captivating documentaries, and the prequel stuff is amazing. Learning how they made those movies and the challenges behind them, it's incredible. It's fascinating stuff to someone like me who loves the art of filmmaking. And then you get to like The Last Jedi, and Disney did this with The Last Jedi too. They made I think it's like an hour and 45 minute, 2-hour documentary on the making of The Last Jedi, which is called The Director and the Jedi. It is second only to the prequel behind the scenes stuff, in my opinion, as far as Star Wars goes. And again, say what you will about Last Jedi itself, but it's fascinating because you learn about Rian Johnson's process and the writing behind it and his challenges and all this other stuff. So I was very excited when they said they were going to be doing a Mandalorian making of documentary series, and it's 8 episodes, and The Mandalorian itself was 8 episodes. But each episode of this documentary, I think, is about an hour each. So you have 8 hours of, time, basically, to go through and document and talk about the making of The Mandalorian. And to be honest, they didn't. Most of their time spent in this documentary was the filmmakers and the cast sitting around a round table. It's a circle jerk, just talking about how much they love Star Wars. The episode 2, especially of this, was just Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, Kathy Kennedy, a couple of other guys just sitting there going, gee, Star Wars is great. Don't you think Star Wars is great? Sure, John, I think Star Wars is great. Dave, what do you think? Well, as you guys know, I think Star Wars is great. For the most part, that is all this documentary is. Now listen, was it kind of cool to hear Dave Filoni talk about the Duel of the Fates and hear why Qui-Gon Jinn is fighting in that moment, and that, Qui-Gon, it's literally the Duel of the Fates, because if Qui-Gon loses that fight, then Anakin's fate is basically sealed, but if Qui-Gon wins, then maybe the entire galaxy is saved. Like, that was really cool to hear, but, it's a Mandalorian documentary about the making of The Mandalorian. Why are we talking about The Phantom Menace in a Mandalorian documentary series? Wouldn't it be great if they actually talked about how they made the fucking show that the documentary is based on? No, we're going to talk about the other movies. It's like everybody involved in The Mandalorian, Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, Kathy Kennedy, and everybody watching this behind the scenes series for the 99% of those people already love and know Star Wars. We don't need to hear them talk about their love for Star Wars. I come to watch a behind-the-scenes documentary on anything to hear how things came together. And I'm watching these 8 episodes, and I'm sitting there and I'm waiting. Because I'm sitting there and I'm going, okay, when is Jon Favreau gonna talk about the writing process? Because he wrote the majority, if not all, of this series. When is he going to talk about the idea, like how he got the idea? When are they going to talk about Jon Favreau pitching it to Lucasfilm? When are they going to talk about the fact that it's going to be the show that launches Disney Plus? When are they going to get into any of that? And in 8 episodes of a show, and maybe I missed something, but I don't think I did. I watched 8 episodes, 8 hours of this documentary. I learned nothing about the process of how they made this show. Aside from the 2 episodes that I mentioned, the volume and the props episode, those were the closest thing that I got to learning about the actual making of this show. Now, I'm not saying it had to be as expansive as the prequel DVDs, but my point here really is the Director and the Jedi, The Last Jedi documentary, that's like what, an hour and 45 minutes? Maybe 2 hours? They had 8 hours to go into the making of The Mandalorian, and they couldn't do what The Last Jedi documentary did in 2 hours or under. I personally would have thought if you were doing a documentary series about the making of something, episode 1 would start at the beginning of the process, and then by episode 8 you would end with the end of the process. But that's not how they did this. It was really bizarre, out of order. I actually think it was quite poorly edited, to be honest with you. Like, episode 8, the final episode of this, Connections or whatever it's called, they just goes through and talk about, like, look at the cool thing from this Star Wars movie that we snuck into the background. Look at the ice cream maker from Willow Hood from Empire Strikes Back. Look at that. Look at the Darksaber. Look at, like, oh, he said this line, which is a reference to episode 4. Like, it's so just... This whole series is just masturbatory to Star Wars. I don't know. I'm just so disappointed in this documentary. I just am, because I didn't learn hardly anything about the process of the making of this show. And I don't know how you guys felt. Maybe you guys found this documentary incredibly informative and you learnt tons of things you didn't already know. That's fantastic. Maybe because, you know, I read all the stuff that I can about these things. You know, maybe I already knew too much and that's why I was disappointed in the show. You could make that argument. I might even make that argument myself. But it's just a disappointment when, you know, you have 8 hours and for the most part, you have people who already love Star Wars and work in Star Wars just sit there and just talk about how they love Star Wars. Listen, I knew they love Star Wars because I already knew that before they even made The Mandalorian, because they were going to make The Mandalorian, and you don't make a Star Wars show if you don't love Star Wars. Anyway, guys, that'll do it for this review. I was incredibly disappointed, and actually I got quite kind of pissed off at this documentary. I didn't like it. It didn't really work for me. I didn't learn anything. Let me know what you guys feel in the comment section below. Maybe you did find it incredibly informative, and if you did, that's fantastic. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that subscribe button, ring that notifications bell so that you never miss out on my take on all things movies, because that is the way. My name is Tom, and I will see you guys next time.